Today we are going to talk about ragtime. Ragtime is mostly a piano music from 1890 to 1915. Was developed by African American pianists. The form of ragtime derived from European marches, and this is the form. We have AA, that means that the A section, you repeat that twice, and then you move to a different section, a B section, and you repeat that twice. Then you go back to your first section, the A section, you only play that once. Then you introduce a brand new section called the C section, and you play that twice, and you end with another brand new section that we are going to call it the D section, and you play that twice. Ragtime originated from march music played by black bands with additional polyrhythms. With ragtime, in terms of jazz and what we are studying right now, ragtime is the rhythm of jazz. What we study about the swing and how the notes move in jazz, a lot of it has to do with ragtime, and that's what we are going to um, learn today. So, when you are listening to all the songs that I'm going to provide you and the videos that I'm going to provide you, I want you to think about the rhythm, because the biggest contribution of ragtime towards jazz was its rhythm. And what I want to do right now, I would like to share with you um, a few videos so you can take a quick look at what ragtime is. Let's start with this one. Here we go.
Hi, and welcome to livingpianos.com and virtualsheetmusic.com. I'm Robert Estrin with a very special show today featuring guest Johnny May.
Hey, Robert. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great having you here.
Yeah, it's awesome to be here.
The subject of the show today is how to play ragtime, and Johnny is an expert at ragtime, as you're going to hear in a minute. First of all, I just want to talk a little bit about what is ragtime. Ragtime is actually an early form of jazz music that came about just before the turn of the 20th century. Interestingly, some ragtime is all written out just like classical concert music, like rags of Scott Joplin are incredibly famous, and yet there are ragtime bands where people are improvising, so it crosses that threshold that covers both genres of music, which makes it a natural fit to have us here together. There's a few things about ragtime that I have heard about, and I don't consider myself an expert. I've played some ragtime music. Scott Joplin was quoted as saying that ragtime should never be played fast. And yet, you think of ragtime as kind of upbeat music.
Right.
So maybe that's a good place to start. Maybe you can give me an idea of, was he on track with that? Or is there some misunderstanding? Or
Well, you know, he's the king of ragtime. So
Absolutely.
he gets to, you know, whatever he says goes. You know, he wrote on the top of his music, do not play fast. And so, you know, I like to play ragtime fast. And, you know, so people, you know, will comment, oh, this is way too fast. And other people love it fast.
Right.
And I just think you should play it how you feel it. And I think he actually played, if you listen to the old piano rolls of Scott Joplin playing, he actually was playing at like 120 beats per minute. It was like pretty
So
fast.
it's pretty fast.
Yeah, it's pretty fast.
Are there any audio recordings of Scott Joplin?
There are audio recordings of those
Right.
Disclavera pianos.
So you wonder if they were calibrated to play back.
Yeah,
you know?
that's true, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
The other thing that I think a lot of people who are not really familiar with ragtime music, they make the mistake of playing kind of that swing feel, da-da-da-da-da, which ragtime really, that was not in vogue yet.
Right, right.
However, what does differentiate ragtime music from other styles of music is the syncopated rhythms.
Right.
Things that are off the beat, and I tell you, when you listen to ragtime, it's almost impossible not to move.
Right, exactly, because of the syncopation.
Exactly.
That's what it is. It's that, you know, syncopation is basically where you have a strong beat in the left hand, and then the right hand is playing against that beat. It's almost like a dance, and
Exactly.
and it works really cool. So,
You know, I wanted to have you do like a demonstration. I thought,
Sure.
what was like some popular song, like could you like do a little, just a little arrangement of Mary Had a Little Lamb, so people could hear what you could do with a simple tune like that
Sure.
in a ragtime style?
sure. Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, like, here's a song everyone knows with syncopation. Okay,
All right.
here we go.
Great.
So here it is. So you can take any song and do it in ragtime. That's the crazy thing, you know. You don't need it doesn't have to be this old, like, 100-year-old song. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's something I enjoy doing, is taking songs on the radio and ragifying it.
So are there, just for our audience, I'm sure they're going to, and we got to talk more about this, but
Yeah.
I'm having so much fun listening to you.
Yeah.
Is there something that's very popular and contemporary that you've turned into your little magical ragtime style?
Actually, as a matter of fact, yes. I did an arrangement of Wake Me Up by Avicii, and that's done really well on YouTube, but I turned it into a ragtime tune. And Avicii, you know, if you know the tune, it's this electro, you know, it's this dance tune, but, you know, it's got this little line, you know. So I turned it into ragtime. Right?
Now, just for all the classical aficionados out there,
Yeah.
you could take a classical piece. As a matter of fact, when you first got here and started playing this piano, I heard you, and I
Yeah.
said, wait a second, isn't that Beethoven? The Ode to Joy from his Ninth Symphony?
Yeah, sure.
If you could play a little excerpt of that, see if
Sure.
you could hear the melody there, because it's kind of hidden in there, but it's there.
Yeah, this is Ode to Joy. This isn't technically ragtime. It's actually more of a swing tune or a stride tune, but it sounds a lot like ragtime.
Okay.
So here's Ode to Joy.
All right. I think one of the biggest challenges with ragtime, particularly if you're reading it, it's almost impossible because the octave chord jumping in
Right,
the
yeah.
left hand.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have any tips for people? How do you get that so you can be fluid
Yeah.
and accurate with
Yeah.
the constant jumping around like
Sure,
that?
and you're absolutely right. Like, it's not a classical technique, and I'm classically trained. I never learned that stride pattern, and it's a really interesting technique. But you know, you can simplify it. I like to do big jumps, you know, where I'm way down here on this low C. But you can actually simplify it and just go, you know, kind of up to, like, you know, I'm playing a C chord. This is C chord. That's just an
Right.
octave.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so you can do that, and then there's little techniques where you can just play 2 notes out of the chord. I like to
Right.
play 3, but you can just do
So you can keep a closer distance between the bass note and the chord.
exactly. Yeah.
Now, I'm curious, it's just a thought occurred to me.
Sure.
Because you're doing all these leaps, and of course you have a right hand part, are you just constantly looking at your left hand, or could you play ragtime successfully with your eyes closed?
I could try it. I don't know how accurate I'd be, but
We've got editing, so
without
hey.
editing, I don't know if you're putting me on the spot here.
You don't have to do it.
scaring
I'm
me.
just curious about that.
You know, I look at my left hand actually because the right hand's pretty stationary. I mean, a rag roll, you know. I mean, I'm just sitting in one spot, but my left hand.
So you really have
know,
to be looking at that left hand.
Yeah, I'm looking, but at the same time, it's automatic. You know, it's a misconception.
Right.
Is people think, well, to be automatic, I'm not looking at it. Well, you know, you're still looking. 'Cause that's a big jump.
And you probably look at your thumb because it's closer than
Right.
looking at all the way at the pinky.
Yeah,
if you're
exactly.
if you're doing octaves.
Right.
And a lot of times you're doing single notes though.
Sometimes I'm doing single notes. Usually, if I'm going real fast, like
Yeah,
if I was
yeah.
doing that, I might go like. I'm doing 2 notes.
Right,
Because it's
right.
the effect. It's a ba, ba, ba. You don't need it. It doesn't have to be a big chord. So.
One of the things I love about Scott Joplin
Yeah.
is that the music is in different sections, and there's almost always at least one retrospective kind of melancholy section.
You're right.
In almost the happiest rag
Sure.
that there is has got one section in it with some really kind
Yeah.
of off harmonies that take it outside before it comes back, where you
Right.
go, ah.
Yes.
And that is such a wonderful thing.
Right.
And I don't know if you could think of any classic examples of a middle section of a rag that gets kind of more deep and introspective.
Sure, I'm trying to think of some rags. You know, Scott Joplin wrote a ton of rags.
I know.
I mean, I know the Peacherine rag. I know Entertainer, Maple Leaf rag. Those
Sure.
don't do that so much. But Scott Joplin's interesting because he considered himself a classical composer. So when
Right.
he was writing his rags, he considered that actually classical music, and it was all notated, and it was very
Exactly.
serious. And so he did that. He was, you know.
Now, here's another question for you. I mean, everybody knows Scott Joplin, anybody who's familiar with ragtime music. And, of course, we've all heard of ragtime bands with the pa with the tuba going the
Yeah.
left-hand part. Boom, boom, boom. Were there other classical type of composers, that is, people who wrote down every note of rags, who Who are some of the other luminaries?
Gosh, there's a lot of guys. Zez Comfrey is one of my favorites. He wrote Kitten on the Keys. You know,
Okay.
he notated every note. Debussy actually wrote some ragtime.
Gollywog's Cakewalk.
Gollywog's Cakewalk. Yeah.
Good point.
So
good point.
there was a span of time where like contemporary composers of that era, real serious classical composers, were writing ragtime. So it was both a classical form and it was a popular form. Gershwin is another great example of someone who was writing popular music and like serious concert music.
Sure.
So.
You know, there's so many directions we can go with this. What I want you to do is to plant the seeds for some future videos we could do together of where ragtime led. You just mentioned, you talked about stride and some of these other styles. In the kind of the history and the chronology of the development of jazz from ragtime, if you give us some brief historical landmarks that maybe we could explore in later videos, I would love that.
Absolutely, sure. Ragtime developed in the late 1800s, really turn of the century. I think it was 1898 Maple Leaf Rag came out. So it was right in the
And just for a moment, play a little bit of the Maple Leaf Rag so everybody
sure,
knows it.
yeah.
Everybody knows it.
The most requested ragtime tune at Disneyland. Everyone. Do you know Maple Leaf Rag? I'm like, which key do you want me to play it in? Should I play it slow? What do you like? Slow? You like
Whatever
it slow?
you like. You're the expert.
I like it fast. I'm gonna go fast. And then the B section, I'll just do a hair of it.
All right. And before I let you go, I just want you to tell people, I know you play at Disneyland and you've got a ton of followers. Tell people about your website. Anybody who's into ragtime is going to want to go to Johnny May's site.
Sure.
So tell everybody about that.
Well, yeah, sure. So I actually have semi-retired from Disneyland. I played there 9 years as the ragtime pianist, Ragtime Johnny. Sure, my website's called Piano with Johnny. It's an educational website, and I teach all of these styles. I teach ragtime, I teach
now,
jazz,
Johnny
blues.
is Jonny.
Sure, Johnny.
So just for everybody, so you can find.
Sure. And as well on YouTube, you know, you can find me Johnny May, and then the education where we put out lots of lessons is Piano with Johnny.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Great. It's a real pleasure having you here. I look forward to more videos with you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks for coming by.
I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, so let's move on to our next video. And this is an example of ragtime through a piece of music that you might recognize.
Who are subscribing to my channel are experiencing ragtime for the first time, and I thought maybe that some of you may not quite understand what exactly ragtime is, because I know when I was first shown a demonstration of syncopated rhythms on drums, I didn't quite get it. I said, well, what makes that syncopated and not the other one? So I thought a visual example would be much better and for someone to notice exactly what makes ragtime. Now, I'm going to use sheet music, but you don't have to be able to read sheet music in order to follow this. The main thing is to be seeing the order that the notes come in relation to the high notes versus the low notes, and reading them from left to right. So we're going to start with we're going to do this with a tune that I'm sure you know, which is a fragment from Johann Pachelbel's famous Canon in D. If you don't recognize that by name, I'm sure you'll recognize it here when you hear it. So I'm sure you know that tune. Now, many people, when they try to write a rag, or when they try to write something in ragtime, they actually don't get it right. What they do is they'll do something like this. But this is not ragtime. I'm sure I get that on the screen. This is not ragtime. So now, why isn't that ragtime? Well, all that is a march. And what I mean is, if you look at the melody and you hum the melody, all the notes that you accent are in line here with the downbeats or the upbeats, pa of the bass. Da 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 da. So you know, say da da. These notes are all lined up, and that's the way all music was before ragtime came around, pretty much. Ragtime introduced putting these accented notes between the downbeats and the upbeats, which had never been heard before, and that's hard for us to imagine because all popular music we hear today is a direct descendant of ragtime. All popular music today has syncopated melodies, and it's hard for us to imagine what it must have been like to hear ragtime for the first time. So let's hear now this tune in ragtime. Another page over here. So here it is in ragtime. The same notes in the same order, but they're just played at different times. So you see, the originally was da 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 da. So this note da that used to start here is now starting here. You see, that's tied over. The same thing here. This note is coming a little bit earlier. It's coming between the chord here and the bass note, between the upbeat and the downbeat. So that is ragtime. And it happens again over here. Instead of the note that was accented on the upbeat, it's coming just before. Da 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 da. So it's just before. That is what makes ragtime. A basic rag has a march bass line, but of course not all marches are ragtime. So it's that syncopated melody that had never been heard before, and it was so shocking. I've read newspaper articles written in the day where doctors were concerned that ragtime was a public health hazard, that it would cause heart palpitations, these uneven rhythms, and it would mess with your brain and make you insane. Well, maybe it did make people insane. And I had another question recently. Somebody asked what a one-step is. Basically, ragtime is generally a two-step. It has to do with dancing, how many steps to do during the dance. But if you see it here, you notice the flow of the melody is twice as fast as the flow of the bass notes. This is all in 16th notes or semiquavers, whereas the left-hand part is in eighth notes or quavers. You know, one step, it's evened out. The tempo is increased, but the speed of the melody is slowed down, and they'll both come out in quavers or in eighth notes, as you'll see in this example. I don't think I can get the whole thing on the screen here, but here's that same syncopated version of the melody, now done on a one step. So that's what constitutes a one-step there. Now, you may also hear us mention sometimes cakewalk rhythm. Cakewalk was very early ragtime, and cakewalks generally had one type of syncopation. And I have an example here of a cakewalk on paper, which is Walking on the Rainbow Road. And you notice that the accented note is always this first one here. It's always right after the first beat. So that's accented note coming between these two notes. Cakewalks generally only have that type of syncopation. They don't have the more advanced syncopations that you would get in ragtime. Unfortunately, most people's first experience with a music called cakewalk is this one. Swipesy, Cakewalk, Scott Joplin and Arthur Marshall, which really isn't a cakewalk, and that's what causes a lot of confusion. It does start with cakewalk rhythm. Whoops, that's not cakewalk rhythm there. Da 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 da. So this has these sort of advanced syncopations that are associated with ragtime, or a rag, because cakewalks are generally considered ragtime, but it's a type of ragtime. Uh, this came out in 1900, so ragtime music, the term rag hadn't really caught on yet, but cakewalks are very popular.
All right. Now let's move on to the composer that I would like you to listen to, and that is Scott Joplin. Scott Joplin is a leading composer of ragtime piano music. He was also known as the king of ragtime. He was trained as a classical musician. He also wrote other styles of music like operas and ballet. And there are two songs that I would like you to listen to. The first one is Maple Leaf. Let's listen to it. Maple Leaf. And here it is.
Now that we've helped people
All right, that's the first one. Now let's listen to our second one.
customize and save with Liberty Mutual, we can finally do some beach reading.
The next one is The Entertainer by the same composer, Scott Joplin. Let's listen to it. All right, and those are the two examples that I really would like you to um, listen to and to get to know the style and the composer. And that is our lesson for today on Ragtime.